likes to cook, or at least will break down and cook because they love you so much. So with that idea, with that thought, is there a little discussion here? Who she likes to, okay,
she doesn't have any other reason.
I thought maybe you were the cook and you're going to have to fess up to it. No? Okay. So, let's, maybe I better get my cheat sheet out just in case I need it. Oh, I can. Thank you, Sue. Okay. So, quick introduction. I'm Zoe Ann. I'm the reference historian here at the Historical Society. For those of you who have never been up to the Research Center, and how many would those be? You've been to the museum. Have you been up to the Research Center? Oh, I love you guys. Excellent. Often and they'll say, oh, well, you guys have a great museum. Well, we do, but have you been to the best part? That's the Research Center. No offense, Sue. Okay. I do, as I explained to someone earlier this week, there are not a lot of job opportunities for history geeks in Montana, and so I landed a really good one. And I love it. And it provides me an opportunity, of course, not only to help the public, but to every once in a while cater to my own passions in history. So just to clarify then, we are at the Historical Society. But the Historical Society has 5 components. It's the museum, which is the one that most people are familiar with. That was Rod. He probably wants to sell you books. He's from the store. So the museum, the Research Center, publications, Historic Preservation Office, and Outreach and Interpretation. The component that I work for, the Research Center, is made up of 3 parts. We have the archives, which is unpublished material. We have the library, which is published material. And then we have photo archives, which is pretty much self-explanatory, right? And we want you to come and do research, right? Whether you've got a great old house somewhere in the area, or you want to learn more about homesteading, or you want to know if you can find that recipe that Grandma used to make for all the potlucks, come and see us. So, all right. Now, cookbooks. When I started this project, as I was saying, it was a passion of mine. We have a collection of 500 cookbooks that are Montana-oriented in the Research Center. That's a whole lot of cookbooks. And it's going to take me a long time to go through all of them. But why is it of historical importance? Well, eating, of course, we've already established we all eat. Eating is a global and a daily occurrence. But food, I don't know about your homes, but I was raised in a Catholic German home, and oh boy, howdy. It was the reason or the instrument for social gatherings. There are traditions. And if you don't believe me, you just talk to one of my girls if I don't make the right salads at Christmas time. They are part of our ceremonies. They are an integral part of our stories, both our cultural stories, Montana stories, and our personal stories. So much more than recipes. As I mentioned, they are our personal stories. Can you smell something baking and it evokes a memory? They are artifacts, because the definition of an artifact is something that has been created or manipulated by man, or in this case, I'm going to say more often than not, women. And it each tells its own story while contributing to the larger Montana historical story. It is shocking, and I have been so surprised at the social trends that I've been able to glean from the cookbooks. One of my favorite is, have you ever heard of mock turtle soup? And then you think, why would they want to make pretend turtle soup? What happened to Jell-O? Oh, yes, yes. I had a group of about 10 high school home ec culinary students that I just introduced to the cookbook collection and walked away, but I made the same question. What happened to Jell-O? And half of them went, oh, gross. I thought, what? Yes, ma'am.
When was it invented, Jell-O?
Oh, that's a good question. It's very early.
Like before 1900?
Oh, I think so. I think it's the late 1890s. Pudding was a much later evolution. And shockingly, chocolate wasn't the first. That's a good question. Let me see if I have that in my little bits and pieces. No. I've got mason jars. I've got Hoosier cabinets, but that's a darn good question. I'm going to say the late 1890s. It shows us the changing culture, technology. Did you go buy the wood cook stove? How many people have cooked on a wood cook stove out of necessity? Is that fun? Well, let's do how many for fun? Carol, do you have one up at the cabin? Yeah?
And my grandmother always cooked everywhere.
As a young bride, I lived in the Yak. We're going to hear more about the Yak Valley. And that's what we had. You guys know where the Yak is? Always suspicious about people who know where the Yak is. We'll have to talk later. Okay, you weren't there in the mid-70s, were you?
No.
Oh, good. Okay, all right. So propaganda, believe it or not. Cookbooks are a great means of propaganda. And of course, they're for our health. The community information. Not all communities would have appreciated eating different parts of a calf. I'm thinking head cheese. Okay? Not all. Oh, you made head cheese out of pork. Oh.
I never heard of without beef.
See? Different communities. Different communities, yeah. Associations and membership, ethnicity. How rich we are and fortunate in Montana with our ethnic backgrounds. And then, of course, the regional differences. Right? I wonder if the calf and the pork head cheese is a little bit, if that's regional or if that's an ethnic difference. So, sidebar, I am going to focus on cookbooks, but there are so many other sources for food and recipes. And I've listed just a few. Grace Stoddard Mason was married to a man, 1914, oh, thank heaven, yes, 1914. He was teaching school in Culbertson. They were newlyweds. Everything was an adventure to her. We have 26 letters that she sent home to her mother and sister in Kalamazoo. She sketches out what she's sewing. She sends them recipes. She talks about what the husband's bringing home from hunting. She talks about what berries they're picking at what time of year and what she's making out of them. I have a copy of her devil's food cake recipe that I'll hand out later. Homestead era collections then, aside from the Homestead letters, collections, the Eliason, and I think it's actually Elias, my apologies. So just collections coming out of the era. Okay, with Marguerite, she was attending a home ec class in 1910 and 1911, and somehow, by some miracle, we wound up with her notes. She has a diagram of the interior of a wood cook stove with the damper and the draw, so that someone studying her notes would understand how to start a wood cook stove, get a fire going. But she also, I have to hook this in with the exhibit that's going in, is just right at the peak of the time that the new exhibit is in, and home keeping, home ec has become a science now. And so she's taking bacteriology and learning about nutrition, physiology, really extensive studies. Advertising. Of course, we've all seen those old baking powder recipes that they have in the ads. But how about 1912, Billings Gazette, the Northern Hotel, which considers itself quite uptown, for ads is running recipes from their continental chef. Okay, great fun. Oh my gosh. And then reminiscences. There are two of my favorites. One is by Ms. Nikki, and she was raised in the Culbertson area. And then my all-time favorite is by Jim Sargent. And he was raised in Wheatland and Sweetgrass counties, depending on population, how the population was swaying, kind of depending on where he went to school, where they had a high school. But he has such a wonderful sense of humor. And one of the things that I learned from these two reminiscences, someone guess, when was the best time for ice cream if you were poor? When did you have homemade ice cream? Winter. It's when you had ice. Or if there was a really bad hailstorm. And both of them mentioned that, and I think, you know, that had to have been a trade-off, because you know that there were some parents going, oh, crap, if there was a bad hailstorm, and then the kids, oh, can we make ice cream? And you just, oh, interesting dynamics. And then articles talking about ethnicity as far back, I found them as far back as 1943. And again, that evolution in this 1943 article about ethnicity, they talk about a group of Italians who settled outside of Lewistown. Okay, they were there to homestead, and by 43 they talk about how these Italians, a wonderful community, still parties and does all these wonderful ethnic foods for their weddings, for their funerals. Okay, so not just cookbooks. Here we go. We also then need to get a perspective of what we're talking about. We're not talking crock pots and microwave ovens. And we probably, for most of the women through 1920, aren't talking about those really nice fancy Monarch stoves. All right, so this is Mrs. Craven. As it says, she was one of the first teachers in the Prickly Pear. But look at her kitchen. Do you see any kitchen counters? I like to think that right here in front she's got a table, but just hopefully a baker's table. I'd like to think she's got some storage. But look at, she's got things hanging up on the wall behind her. She's got a bucket on the stovetop. No refrigerator, no ice box. That's right. That's right. Oh, excuse me. Don't make me laugh. It's too noisy. So there's also different approaches. Oh, before we move on, ice. Getting back to ice. This is a surprise whenever I say it. So let me make sure I'm doing the right dates. But the first mass-produced ice box didn't come out until 1927. Excuse me, electric refrigerator. Before that time, of course, there were ice boxes. So ice harvesting was a viable profession and trade in Montana well through the 30s and into the beginning of the 40s. So, and then that's a whole nother topic, trying to imagine what it was like harvesting ice and then keeping it stored through the year. All right, different approaches to the cookbook story. Of course, I will start with the oldest. And then I'm going to look at different community cookbooks. I'm going to look at population ethnic trends. That's so much fun. The promotional cookbooks that I mentioned, the propaganda, my personal favorites, because I'm the speaker. And then some that are unbelievable treasures for the state of Montana. All right. So, as far as I know, and I I want to tell you, I'd be more than happy if someone walked into the research center tomorrow and said, "No, I found something older." But as far as I know, the oldest cookbook produced by people in Montana is Butte, 1881. All right. It was published in Lincoln, Nebraska, but edited and compiled by the ladies of Butte City. It includes lots of different categories: soups, vegetables, cakes, cookies, pies, puddings, creams, ices, a chapter for summer drinks. Of course, lots of pickles and relishes. Instead of candy, it's confectionery. Right? So, as I was going through the cookbooks, I tried to come up with some sort of way to compare how the recipes were evolving. And I chose coleslaw, a coleslaw salad dressing, because salad dressing is consistent from 1881 on, not necessarily the same. And then lemon pie lemon crops up a lot. And then just something that caught my fancy. So when you're looking at this, this is how the recipes are written. This is a direct quote from the cookbooks. All right? I'm not seeing, well, we do have 1 teaspoon of sugar, a small piece of butter, a little mustard if desired. Those early cookbooks were created with the assumption that the people reading them had a skill set. And going into the 1890s, right, most women were learning how to cook from a mother or from female relatives or female acquaintances. All right? And again, that skill set, how do you know if an oven is hot or medium hot? Stick your hand in there. See, I did find directions, and this seems like a lot of work, but put a dusting of flour on a cookie sheet, or just the bottom of a pan, turn the pan over, and then put it in and see how long it takes for it to brown. Exactly. You know what? They weren't the good old days. And then lemon pie. Now, coincidentally, 1881 is the same year that the railroad hit Butte from Salt Lake City. Okay, we're not just receiving stuff via freight. So, lemon pie, take 1 lemon, grate a little with a yellow rind only, squeeze out all the juice, 1 teacup of sugar. By the way, a teacup is 6 ounces. 1 tablespoon cornstarch, 1 egg, 1 cup boiling water. That's the recipe. Do it, yeah. It's a good thing she's doing the cooking. I bet she knows. So, and then the fried tomatoes, and of course I just had to pick this out because lard. It's just all about the lard. So, and boiling butter, oh, I guess so. I'm always all about that lard. So one of the wonderful little details of the Butte Cookbook is the introduction says this: of the thousands of cookbooks in the field, good, bad, and indifferent, theoretical and practical, not one is especially adapted to the needs of cooks of the Rocky Mountains. For reasons chemical and economical, a recipe which is a complete success in the East or the South may prove wholly unserviceable here. So I love the idea that this amazing group of women in Butte got together, and chances are they've all come to the conclusion that, holy smokes, the mile-high city is a little hard to bake in. It takes forever to boil the water, even longer to cook beans. And so they are sharing that wonderful experience with every other woman that comes after them. So great, great stuff. So that's Butte. The next one is a book titled Crumbs of Comfort. And sadly, the title page for our copy is missing. As near as we've been able to figure, it's right around 1893. It is from Helena. The women from Helena say, in scattering these crumbs of comfort among our friends, we beg to say that it has not been the design of the Guild to give a complete cookbook, full in all departments. Our only aim has been to secure a limited number of known and approved rules, the majority of which, besides their own excellence, will have the added flavor of pleasant memories. So, again, different chapters. This one has pickles and ketchups, lots of ketchups, and ketchup out of just about everything that you can juice.
That title is really great.
Isn't that a wonderful title? Yeah? Yep.
Lettuce sandwich.
Yeah.
You know,
Low cal. Except for the butter, of course.
you know, I went to give one time to Matt's drive-in, and I said, you know, I want to have what people from Butte really have. And she said, lettuce and tomato sandwich. I had one. It was
Oh.
yes. And whoever has one, but it was
Uh-huh. That, I like that. Now, what, did they put butter on it? What, mayonnaise? What was it?
When you're eating in a restaurant, you don't take the part of the seed. You just
Yeah.
eat and you say,
For you. Trusting soul. All right. So out of this cookbook, cabbage dressing, all right, sweet cream, vinegar instead of lemon juice, 1 egg, sugar. Let vinegar boil, stir an egg, set it off the stove, and stir in cream. Pretty basic. And then the lemon pie, little more specific, 1 cup sugar, 1 lemon, 1 tablespoon of flour, 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon butter. This is for 1 pie. Now, the earlier recipe told you what to do with the lemon. And do you have any questions about that recipe, sir? Okay. Slice the lemon. I'm going to let you take him home and explain it. All right. And then for my favorite, chicken croquettes. Oh my gosh, when was the last time you even heard about croquettes, let alone had one? Oh my goodness. Chicken, cooked tender. Look at that, half a pint of sweet cream, melted butter, sugar or salt and pepper to taste, press in cone shape, and fry in hot lard. It's in the days where, imagine some guy who has been in the mine for hours and hours, and the calories he has probably used up, and what kind of calories he needs to replace it. Or been, well, just anybody in 1893, and the amount of physical labor it took just to get through the day. So, all right. I am going to take a shift here because I don't want to be accused of being a sexist, even though I might be picking on the men in the... This is by one of my favorite photographers, LaHuffman. I was born in Miles City, and LaHuffman came to the Miles City area very early on as a military photographer. Lived in Fort Keogh, and then retired from the military and moved into Miles City. And he took photos, he captured the end of the Big Range era and the very beginning of the Homestead era. And he's got about half a dozen photos of the back of chuck wagons, and I think they're just fascinating. This one has the best looking man. So, this gentleman's name, I'm just saying, on LaHuffman's notes, he calls him Mex John. There is some evidence that his name may be John Salzar. I have yet to find him, but I keep thinking that he's been reincarnated because I want a man that looks that good in a cowboy hat and makes that kind of pies. Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. No, he's going to have to let me sleep in. You're right, 5 o'clock. How do you... There goes my fantasy man. So, talk about men cooks for a little bit. This is a cookbook that is not directly related to Montana, but I'm so glad that it is in the collection. It is the manual, as it says, for Army cooks. 1896. And if this, quite honestly, I think if I had to pick one cookbook for survival's sake, this is it. Because it tells you everything, everything. It gives lists of tinware that are needed, instructions on an inexpensive ice box. The recipes go on, and it has Spanish recipes, which I find interesting because this is a little before the Spanish-American War. Now, Butte has been enjoying, by this time, Butte is already enjoying, not burritos, tamales. But there aren't very many places in Montana by 1896 that are enjoying ethnic foods. I'm going to say Hispanic foods. So, this is just one glimpse at, look at rhubarb, rice, and then over here sauerkraut. Look at salsa. And then you get down here, and there's scurvy and diarrhea caused by want of skill in cooking. Like I say, a little bit of everything in this book. I'm in your way. I'm sorry. I have to move when I talk. Just ask Sue. She shared an office with me for a while. Okay. So there was no coleslaw dressing, for lack of a different, anything under that title, but there is this salad dressing recipe. And this is what it says in the book. Okay, we've got oil, yolk of 1 egg, mustard, salt, vinegar. Rub together the oil and egg. It is better to first beat the egg, then rub in the mustard, then the salt, and lastly the vinegar gradually. A few grains of cayenne pepper may be added. A boiled Irish potato mashed fine may be substituted for the yolk of the egg. A little thickener then, they're thinking. If the oil and egg or potato do not mix well, a few drops of vinegar will facilitate the process. Instead of oil, there may be used melted butter, cream, or the juice from boiled ham. Again, this is, when about to serve the salad, pour over the dressing. All right, are you ready? It's not coleslaw dressing, but read this. This salad may be used with every species of lettuce, chicory, endive, watercress, celery, cabbage, dandelion, onions, tomatoes, etc. Cold boiled cauliflower, beets, string and dried beans, boiled or baked corn, potatoes, etc. Chicken, turkey, lobster, crab, boiled or baked salmon, shrimp, etc. In other words, you can pour that over anything. Then, I got a kick out of this. Gives rules for disposal of garbage. Particular attention is directed to the cleanly method of burning all kitchen refuse in the campfire. It will not affect the cooking. Burn everything, coffee grounds, parings, bones, meats, even old tin cans, for if thrown out anywhere, even buried, they attract flies. Tin cans are fly traps. Burned and cleaned out of fire daily, they are harmless. Fire should be cleaned of burnt refuse once a day, as refuse burned will not attract flies. Cleanliness is a good doctor. The burning of refuse, not burying it, is a splendid rule, especially in a large command or permanent camp.
It's a cookbook for the camp cook.
Yes.
It sounds like it was written by a man.
Yes. Yes. Written by a man for men. Bum, 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 bum.
I want to know where they got the lobster.
Well, yeah, but
It's national, so I guess.
But I've been to New England, and they treat lobster like we treat tuna fish. It's shocking. Just to a Montana girl, it was, what are you doing to that lobster? You know, they just toss it in a light dressing and put it on a roll, and but it's lobster, but it's wonderful. So I know that there are places where lobster is a little more plentiful than here in Montana. Okay, so the next bunch of books that I'm going to talk about are the community cookbooks. How many people have contributed to community to church groups, historical society, fraternal groups, work? right? They're great fundraising. I have some favorites, and I have some that I don't care for, I have to admit. So let's see. One of my favorites is the Red Lodge Cookbook, and we're going to get back to that. Ladies' Society of the Congregational Church. That's 1907. It's very early. Another one that I really like is from the Bridger area, Canyon Cookery. And I'll tell you why I like this. Aside from the recipes, oh my gosh, local histories. Yes, you can. You bet. Photos. Oh, see, these are tips for the next time you're involved in community information. It just goes on and on and on. There you go, Carol. All right, let's see, what have I got? Oh, yes, there's a 1928 book that I really like because it has a special section of Spanish, Italian, French, and German recipes. And then, one of the first Jell-O salads coming out of a cookbook, 1939, Fort Peck. Okay, great stuff. Now, the earliest community cookbook, at least again, the one that I've been able to find, there are 500, there could be more, and we could argue that the Crumbs of Comfort was a community cookbook, but this talks about the specific group, comes out of Fergus County, 1902. And they had a lemon pie recipe. Now we've gone from, what was the last one? 1896 to 1902. Now look at how much more specific the recipe is. They're starting to think we don't know what we're doing.
And more complicated.
Yeah. Again, there's that lemon, sugar, yolks of 5, and the whites of 2 eggs, milk, cornstarch, butter. Let's see, and then, of course, then they tell us what to do with all those. So thicken the milk with cornstarch and let it come to boil, then stir it into the other ingredients, and it tells us where to put it. Pour into a pie plate covered with a paste and bake. All right. So very good stuff. Right. Now, we're going to go with the flow here. So, the yak. And you two, I just want you to grin and nod when I talk about the yak. All right, for those of you who may not know where the yak is, anybody not know where the Yak Valley is? It is the northwestmost corner of Montana. You leave Troy, Montana, you follow the Kootenai River. I think it's about 5 miles up to the top of the divide. And then you take a right-hand turn and follow the Yak River. And if you follow it far enough, you will become an illegal alien in Canada. I've never done that. So, the people of the Yak, again, every community has its personality. But the Yak has been, is and still is, a very isolated area. They did not get power until the 1950s when the US Air Force opened up a radar base up there, thinking no one's going to find this place. And they were right. When I was up there in the 70s, there were still lots of cabins and homes. They just were cooking off of wood cook stoves. Lots of logging going on in the 70s. Now, as you can tell, this cookbook has photos of locals, and it highlights what is special about the yak. Okay, so watch this. First, had a colleague play with my PowerPoint. My apologies for this. So, there was no coleslaw dressing, but there was a fruit salad dressing. And look at how simple. Eggs, sugar, vinegar, lemon juice. Boil, put on fruit. No lemon pie, but there were lemon bars, and then so much more. cougar casserole, I kid you not, and that's included in the handout tonight because I know you're going to want to go home and fix that. Grouse stir fry, upside down, huckleberry corn cake, moose stew, and Lester's jerky. Now, does that give you an idea of what the people up in the Yak do in their spare time?
What year was this?
Oh, that's a good question. What, did I put the Yak out? Oh, it's right here. And here they dedicate it to Mrs. Ramiko. Okay. Her husband had the first home still I ever saw. That's, again, another story. Looks like 1999.
Have you ever had cougar stew?
I have not. I have seen a cougars a couple of times, way too close. If you had chickens up in the Yak, you traditionally ran into them, but I have not. And interestingly enough, the cougar stew is a very complex recipe. There's wine in it and lots of herbs and spices. It's not for the faint of heart. So, all right. Now let's take a jump into the ethnic recipes and trends. Okay. So, the first collection of, I'm going to say consistently ethnic foods comes out of Red Lodge, 1907. Not only do you find wonderful ethnic names throughout the book, but they have chapters in the back that are devoted to specific ethnicities. And by the way, it still has, is this a great job or what? Let me see, lots, and all the pages in the back have handwritten recipes. Have merchants from Red Lodge, 1907, lawyers, please no lawyer jokes, and just a minute, all right. You know what, I'm getting it mixed up with another one, my apologies. The whole book is mixed up, just a wonderful group of diverse names. What is really special is there are recipes submitted by 2 different Chinese men. And I was able to find one, Mr. Lee, and he had a restaurant in Carbon County. One, let's see, I think 1900 he's got a restaurant. In 1910 he's living in, is it Absorki? No, can't remember the exact place, but his address is right smack dab in the middle of middle-class merchant neighborhood. I think it speaks very well for the folks in Carbon County and Stillwater. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, were a lot of these cookbooks written, looks like a lot of churches, were they fundraisers or were they?
I think they were doing the same thing we do today. They were raising money. Yep. And many of them are published out of state. So my guess is that they were being, like this one came from Kirksville, Missouri, that they were probably being hit up by salesmen just like we are today. Doesn't your community, doesn't your church want to put together a cookbook? Thank heaven they did. So, all right, here's the one. St. John's Guild Book, Butte, 1923. It has chapters devoted specifically to English, Scotch, French, German, Italian, Jewish, Mexican, Norwegian, and Spanish. So what do Butte and Red Lodge have in common? Mining. Mining.
I guess I didn't know the Red Lodge area was mining. I knew it was, but
No, it's all about mining. Coal mining. Sidebar, I'm a historian, and I like to talk. One of the worst mining disasters in the country took place just outside of Red Lodge, early 40s, the Bear Creek disaster. Heart-wrenching. In fact, then I'm going to say one of the most poignant artifacts we have in the collection, which is overlooked probably by 99% of those of us who go through the museum. When we're done, I want you to walk through, and right before you get to the children's exhibit on the right, there's a little plank. And it's got etching in it, and you can hardly see it. But it was written by a man who was dying of asphyxiation in this mine to his wife and daughter. Now, is that history? Ooh, ooh. Okay, back to cooking. Back to cooking. So, Red Lodge then continues that wonderful heritage because they used to have on a very regular basis the Festival of Nations, and then every couple of years would come out with a cookbook of ethnic recipes. Wonderful, wonderful. But of course, we have to give Butte its due, because this cookbook has got to take the prize for community pride in ethnicity. And I've got a copy of the index. All right, so we start with American Indian. We have blacks, Cornish, English, Finnish, everything you can think of. There's even Jewish, Welsh, Yugoslavian, and that's not enough because we have to have a chapter for wild game and food preservation, and then of course the history of Butte. This cookbook is phenomenal. And eating out, yes. Yes. So what year is this? Let me see if I...
80s. It's interesting that there's no Chinese in there, given the Chinese population.
There's Oriental. So there's Oriental, then Chinese, the art of Oriental cooking, then Korean and Japanese. Mm-hmm. You had me going for a minute, Carol. Woo! But you're right, it's not under Chinese. Let's see, yeah, it's 1976. A little politically incorrect. All right. So the next group are the promotional or propaganda cookbooks. Now, the first thing I have to tell you is you can joke about going to Napa and picking up a cookbook. This is a great cookbook. It has an upside-down chocolate pudding pie. You make a meringue and then put your chocolate pudding on top, and then, of course, that's not enough. Then you have to put some more pudding on. Oh my goodness. More promotional cookbooks. Of course, we've got that Cream of the West. And it's still a company that's viable. They've moved out of Billings and are now working out of Harlowton. Sapphire Flowers from Montana. But do you see that one in the middle, the Electric Range? That set of cookbooks, those being published by the electric companies, are my favorite group of propaganda cookbooks. Because can you imagine how you go about convincing a woman who learned from her mother how to cook on a wood cook stove and telling her we've got something easier and better? Lots of propaganda put out by the electric companies to get women and men and their husbands to buy electric. Yes, ma'am?
Sorry, in your, it's not Montana Power, but Northwest Energy Bill,
Yeah.
bills now all have recipes.
They have recipe cards.
Mayonnaise, jalapeno.
Ah, you've tried them. Actually, you're right, and I've started just kind of putting them in a corner of one of my cabinets. But that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. They're going full circle. Then we have a few that have nothing much to do with Montana, but they're so pretty, like this Campfire Marshmallow Cookbook. Oh. Okay. Recent temptations. Now, the one on the left, when it came out, well, how many of you have been to Chico? Yeah. You drive down Paradise Valley, we've got a beautiful state, but Paradise Valley is pretty great. And then you pull up into that little canyon, and there is this exquisite location, a little bit of paradise, and they have gourmet food to boot. Oh. So when this came out, I really do like this book. I did buy it for all three of my daughters for Christmas that year. The recipes, although the food is highbrow, for lack of a different term, but the recipes are very down to earth. So those of us who are basic cooks, and I'm a basic cook, you can come up with something fantastic from this cookbook. And then one of my favorite cookbook authors is a gentleman, Greg Patton. He lives in Missoula, and he was not from Montana originally, and I think he was a professor and taught chemistry or zoology or something. Say again?
They just had an article in the paper about him.
They did.
Or is he in the Historical Society magazine?
Oh, don't tell me he's in the historical magazine. Okay,
Is it one in the Montana magazine?
oh, the Montana magazine. Okay, that's not Montana, the magazine of Western history. But I will look it up. Thank you, I am safe.
Just came.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice article.
Great. Well, one of my favorite recipes in here, again, just wonderful, rich food, but rhubarb ice cream. Yeah, it's spring. And of course, rhubarb or pie plant. Some people call it pie plant. But put that in with your ice cream, and we don't need to wait for a hailstorm.
Now, is there vitamin C in rhubarb or not? Anybody know?
What was the question?
No. What kind of vitamins are in rhubarb? All of them. I like that. Lots of fiber. And you know how your teeth kind of squeak after you've eaten it? There's an acid there that's really good for you, but I can't remember what the name of the acid is.
But I think it would be rich in vitamin C.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying to Beth, my rhubarb plant died last year.
No.
And I'm looking at it thinking, am I seeing any life to it
Oh.
this spring? And I'm not. And she said hers did too.
Oh. Well, I am glad to say
They're really hard to kill.
they are. I wonder what the dynamic was
I don't know.
there. Do you think it was too dry?
It may have been too dry, and I thought that in the middle of the summer because even though I have water to it,
Sure.
I have not been watering it thinking that, and it may have been.
Call Peggy, there's quite a few over there in her house.
Well, normally they're hard to kill.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm glad to say I took the mulch off of mine just Sunday, and I've got just ruby red sprouts coming out. Wait. Can't wait.
Yes, you see them around homesteads, they don't die. Like one
Still growing.
Bit of foundation, but that's after it's taken care of.
Uh-huh.
Look for the foundation.
It's kind of an archaeological marker. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It probably was too dry and I wasn't.
Oh,
No, you don't know homesteads, they live forever around homesteads.
uh-huh.
Once they're established, they don't need
Oh, lilacs. I'm sorry. Oh,
Because it was big and beautiful.
yeah?
Couldn't possibly use all of it.
I will say, anybody have extra rhubarb, drop it off at Sue's office and I'll pick it up. She has an office on the main floor. Okay, so, but there are still lots of wonderful cookbooks coming out of Montana. Now then, so we've talked about new cookbooks, and yes, the Yak, Ringling, Lewistown, Cream of the West, Sapphire Flower, Butte, all wonderful. But, as I say, for dessert, I've saved some of the most historically amazing books for last. There are several books in our collection which, for their historical value, are simply shocking and amazing. And yes, I am a history geek. Okay, the first, circa 1925, and it speaks for itself, Montana Federation of Negro Women's Clubs. And as I explained, choice recipes of cateresses and best cooks of the state, compiled by Emma Harris, State Chairman of Ways and Means Committee, Billings. Now, the amazing, even more amazing about this cookbook is that it identifies the members and talks about the members as well. So again, all that community information. And it explains in the introduction that that we are the best cooks in Montana because we cook for a living and cater. So that is how many of the members were making their living. If you're familiar with, I'm going to say Great Falls, you know that there were many communities that have a rich African American history. And we've lost that part of our population. But at one time, Montana had more African Americans than the 2 Dakotas, Wyoming, and Idaho all combined. But they still only made about 1% of our population, but it was still more than Wyoming and the Dakotas. So, amazing artifact, isn't it? Okay, now this one. Oh. So, this book is not with the rest of the collection. It is in a locker in the back. And quite honestly, I've been here 6.5, 7 years, and I've seen Mrs. Lincoln's Boston Cookbook back there, and just thought, okay, one of these days I'm going to start on a cookbook project, and I'm going to pull it and figure out why the heck Mrs. Lincoln's Cookbook, Mrs. Lincoln's Cookbook is back there. So time came, and I pulled it out, and I do know that Mrs. Lincoln's Boston Cookbook, she originally published in 1884. She had a cooking school in Boston, and she taught Fanny Farmer. So Fanny Farmer is often given credit for standardizing the cooking world, but actually all you have to do is look at Mrs. Lincoln's to know that she got her inspiration from the classes from Mrs. Lincoln. But that's not why the cookbook's cool. All right, so we open the front page, and we have Evelyn Cameron's signature. Now, this book was published in 1890, and Evelyn, Mrs. Cameron, has written New York, March 1890, and so I have to admit that I was, for the last year, operating under the misconception that that must have been when she bought the book. But one of our wonderful researchers who is going through the Cameron diaries informed me that the Camerons in 1890 were off in western Montana bear hunting. She found later in, I think it's 1901, the Camerons have gone back to Scotland for a visit, and she has in Mrs. Cameron's handwriting that she has ordered a cookbook out of the Montgomery Ward cookbook, or Montgomery Ward catalog. And here it is. It gets better, just when you think it can't. Every page that was blank is filled with her handwriting and handwriting that I'm going to assume were neighbors' handwriting of neighbors. They're swapping recipes. All right. This is Evelyn Cameron's bread recipe. And then we've got notes. By the way, this, let's say, I hesitate to, it's reverse EE connected. That was their brand. So you see it over here. And by the way, this is, it says, out the kitchen window, March 1905. Horses on a hill. And then here is the brand again. She tells you that 2 pounds of coffee for 2 persons lasted 3 weeks. Let's see. 50 pounds of flour lasted, what's that say up on top? 8 weeks. Okay. 13 pounds of flour made a batch of bread as follows. 4 loaves, 3 round small pans, 1 batch of twists, 1 plate roll, and 1 cup pan of rolls. 8. It's amazing. It's great. Another fun thing, her ethnic recipes. She has got so many handwritten recipes that use ginger. Does anybody make beer here? Because I would love to give you her ginger beer recipe so you can make it so I can taste it.
My son does. You would love that.
I would love, okay, we have to, okay, all right. And I'm serious. I just want to taste this, okay? She also has a recipe for curry. Very urban. All right. So for dessert, I give you then Evelyn Cameron in her kitchen. Notice the similarity with the kitchen outside. And there she is right next to her handwritten bread recipe. Boy, history is pretty cool, isn't it? So I would submit to you to ask yourself what's been lost, though, aside from Jell-O. Some of the things that I've found that were lost, there are many of the cookbooks will have a special section for stale bread because nothing was wasted, nothing. Stale bread, out of bread they made a brewis. It was essentially just cream toast, but really creamy, less toasty. Again, cream toast, milk toast, bread sauce, croquettes, bread pudding. What's not to love?
I made 3 batches of bread pudding within the last month because I made one that was so good, I made another one, and it was so good, I made another one.
Is there anything more comfort food than bread pudding?
And you don't have to have a recipe, you just have to kind of put in whatever. But if you have some old, kind of almost black bananas, that's really the best thing to, oh, man.
I have never put ripe bananas in bread pudding.
I
Oh,
had this
Carol.
bread and this other stuff, and I just thought, yeah.
Then the house is going to smell and, all right, doggone it. All right.
Did anybody else have a mom that would make a milk toast when they were sick?
My mother
Yeah.
liked it, I didn't like it.
See,
I never liked it.
I wanted, when I had that stomach flu, I was just so wishing.
what, the milk toast?
Was there to make milk toast for me.
Well, that's,
No, we-
oh, look at her. Evidently not from the missus here. Whoa. My mother would she would stew tomatoes and then put toast in it. So that, no, doesn't work for me. Then, great sanguine recipes for invalids. A lot of the cookbooks from the early years have an invalid or sick room section. So lots of broiled meats, clear broths, custards, ices, and egg cream. That's enough to make you want to get a little sick. Custards, ices, and egg cream. Home remedies. Of course, the poultices that we hear of, but castor oil, turpentine. We have a recipe for turpentine and lard, and it's a precursor for Vicks. It's something, oh, excuse me, something you put on your chest to relieve the cough. I have not tried that out. Yeah. If you dogs don't stop barking, I'm going to put turpentine on your chest. So, laundry instructions were often included. And I mean serious laundry instructions. What kind of stain was it? What kind of fabric was it? What kind of chemicals do you have in the house to treat it? Then, of course, soap making. Okay. Soap. Is it out of lard or tallow? Anybody else? Raised with homemade? Lard? Lard? I presented at one of the care centers here in town, and there was a 102-year-old woman and about a 92-year-old woman sitting next to each other, and they got into a quarrel about whether you use lard or tallow for making soap, and it was getting pretty heated. So that's exactly it. It's what you had.
Wood ashes.
Oh, and then the wood ashes to make the lye. Yep. Oh. So, I would ask you, what family recipes do you think have been lost to you? And if you're worried about them, you get them written down. Okay?
I just wish that you could buy veal.
Oh, well, can't you?
Well,
Not,
not
what you're-
not in the grocery store like you used to
Yeah.
be able to.
yeah.
Just one of my favorite recipes is my grandmother's veal. Yeah.
How did she fix it?
In her cast iron skillet, and when she put
cast iron skillet made all the difference.
Isn't that interesting?
But if you know, you just don't see veal.
I want to know, how did she fix it?
Oh, she
you
breaded
wouldn't
it
mind.
with, actually, saltine crackers in egg, and then in saltine crackers, browned that, and then
Okay.
sour cream and mushrooms.
Oh.
I do it with chicken breasts.
Mm-hmm.
That's my substitute for veal.
Sour
But
cream
it
and
is
mushroom.
it's
Comfort food.
And lemon meringue pie for dessert.
Oh, I really struck a chord then.
That's always what she said, you know, we were coming for dinner, she'd ask me if I would like the breaded veal.
Sure.
And it was always lemon meringue pie for dessert.
Sure. Oh,
Which
that's
made me feel very special
wonderful.
also.
But I love the dynamics with the cast iron skillet.
The cast iron
That's-
skillet, I don't know which of my kids is going to get the cast
Oh.
iron skillet, but somebody will get the cast
Is
iron
it?
skillet.
See, and that, I don't know about your family, but it's those everyday things
Yeah.
that
It's important
siblings
that cast iron
squibble
skillet
about.
is important.
Yep. All right, so where are we? Again, I began with, did I begin with LaHuffman? No, I did have LaHuffman early on, and this is a picture of a ranch kitchen by LaHuffman. So I hope that I have convinced you that cookbooks are not just for recipes and for cooking.
Are they available for
And-
sale? Are any of them available for sale?
No, I'm afraid not. Certainly, Greg Patton's book and the Chico Cookbook still are, but these are not. But you are welcome to come and sit. And right now I've got this card out. It's going to be out probably for another 18 months because 3 colleagues and I are working on some cookbook projects. So I would ask you, what stories are in your cookbooks? And in those aromas that come out of your cooking and your cast iron skillet. So, any questions? Carol?
I have a question, Joan, that because of your project here, I started looking through one of my mother's old recipe boxes. And one of the recipes I found was truly for blackbird pie.
Blackbird pie?
Blackbird pie. And what's in blackbird pie? Blackbirds. Maybe we could get magpies in there. And put it in
Ooh,
there.
ooh.
And, you know, other small game birds.
Starfish.
And that was the
Starling.
That was my dad's twin brother's second wife, who was from Missouri, and she also had recipe for scrapple.
Oh, yeah?
And I've forgotten, there were several more, but on one of them, on the back, it said that the recipes were taken from, and I have forgotten the name, but it was a firm that made iron ranges, the wood burning.
Oh,
stove.
Monarch? Or
It wasn't
something like
Monarch,
that.
It wasn't Monarch.
Okay.
Because it wasn't Laurel, it wasn't.
Yeah, okay. Now, getting back to what this gentleman said about the tallow versus lard conspiracy, and then it's tied into the fact that our ancestors didn't waste anything. But my dad tells a story. He grew up in Miles City during the Depression, has wonderful memories of it. But Grandpa was the custodian for the Catholic Church, and he and the boys, there were 2 brothers in the family, would set traps for pigeons up in the belfry. And then if they caught enough pigeons, they'd have squab for dinner. And Dad said it was one of their favorite meals. So you used what you had. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Such food snobs. I've been trying to find the background to a recipe that my grandma used to make, and would I be able to come up and then just look through, could I get assistance to try to find this particular recipe with what the collection is?
Yeah.
Is it the kind of thing that we need to make an appointment to come? Is that
The
bad?
Research Center is open to the public 9 to 5, Tuesday through Friday. You won't be able to use a pen, only pencils,
Oh, okay,
but you come up.
okay.
Yep, and we'll just start looking. Start looking. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any specifically Depression era cookbooks?
There are. And I'm going to say that I don't see a lot of change. Where the change is really noted is during the World Wars.
Yeah, my wife has a collection of advertising cookbooks. She must have about
Good question.
50 now. And there's all kinds of recipes without eggs.
Mm-hmm.
World War II, it was almost everything was the war.
Or lots of what, it was interesting what they consider a meat substitute. Fish was not a meat, and so you could have fish. Sue, that is a good question, and I'm, like I say, nothing pops out that's really different.
Well, like when you were talking about stewed tomatoes,
Mhm,
my mother
mhm.
grew up in the Depression and all the kind of stuff that we had. That's all she knew how to cook, which was really kind of, really pretty bad.
Mhm.
Pretty bad.
Mhm, mhm.
So we had stewed tomatoes on
Mhm.
toast.
We had
Yeah.
chipped beef on toast. We had macaroni and tomato soup.
Mhm. But now, let's look at this through a jaundiced eye. Would a community that didn't have a lot of food be making a cookbook to sell during the Depression? No. So here we've got Missoula, 1936, and I think this is the Fort Peck one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the one that's got the old Jell-O recipe. Oh my God, it's so great.
I mean, I still like Jell-O.
I love Jell-O.
I often make anything, I don't make Jell-O salad.
Mhm, mhm.
Was raised Jell-O. What is Jell-O? I mean,
Well, it's,
is that cow disease? 'Cause
Well, it actually has gelatin.
yeah. You know when you say, when you put in a bunch of beef bones and meat to make soup, and you just get it down so you've got that wonderful broth, but that gel, I call it kind of a gel, separates from it, that's the gelatin. And it comes out of animal bones.
that's so much work, though, that they must have fake gelatin now or something, do you think? You think it's really, it's so
I think
It
they've
is.
been able to just dry it to form it into a powder. That's
Mhm.
how it works.
And probably pasteurized. so
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Yep.
have to worry about.
Yep. Well, I have put together just what I hope are just some fun things. The earliest recipes, now the cookbook was 1881, but there was a newspaper coming out of Diamond City, and they had a home section. Just about every, was it Confederate Gulch? Isn't that where Diamond City is? Yeah. And so sample of that and just anything, but come up and see me.
The other thing that we ate an awful lot of during the war, and I think the end of the Depression, was creamed tuna fish on rice. And I don't know if other people ate that, but my kids liked it, actually.
I made a tuna fish casserole.
You're welcome. So
Yeah.